Yeah, I do want to keep the concept of resistance to nourishing change, I guess, in the background. I always, it relates to the life forces. I've got a slightly tangled up performance life force. So it's always harder in some ways to present the material that's just mine as against the material that David's. Just a little thing I've got. So resistance to nourishing change is quite specific, as I've said on previous sessions here. It is change that we could achieve that in a sense is within our capability and we want. And it is, in my experience of training practitioners, training counselors and psychotherapists, the hardest part of the training. In Pelham, and if you want to look at the manual, resistance to nourishing change is written up there. And, you know, resistance to nourishing change is like there's a peach hanging on the tree and we could reach out and we don't. And part of the history of it is doing something different, which, what in my field of work, counseling and psychotherapy and social work, was called a resistant client, or a resistant patient. So that person is resistant rather than we're all resistant. And if that client or patient is having a hard time, the responsibility is on me to help them through that hard time. It's quite a, in some ways, complex point in terms of almost the philosophy of the helping professions, within which they don't look at how protective they are of themselves. And within that, they hold back the development of the field, in my view. I mean, sort of that's, you know, that's a book in itself, that one. But to bring it back to the practicality, when I was developing the material in the first years of the Pendulum Institute, and residential programs, I guess you could say that resistance to nourishing change comes up in families and residential programs almost inevitably. And it's, I guess here I'd say it's a phenomenon. You know, we all have things we could change and won't, but what we're saying in Pelham is that is the human condition. We've all got it. It's not, oh, that group of people, they're resistant. Years ago when I was first, which is close to where Vic is, which pleases me no end. Thank you, Vic. But, you know, Haney, British Columbia is in the Fraser Valley. And, you know, that's where I worked. Small British Columbian town in the Fraser Valley, the Fraser being one of Canada's magnificent rivers like nowhere else. Um, you know, and sort of wanting to do something different than saying, oh, that's a resistant client. And particularly way back then, there was a category not suitable for treatment. Because they're horrible, this kid's horrible and won't listen to anyone and whatever. Serving 3 years in an adult prison for beating somebody up and, being a messed up kid. And I felt not suitable for treatment was draconian and not fair. Anyway, that's the sort of background. So coming up with this concept, we all have resistance to nourishing change. Then it is on the responsibility, if I can put it that word, of the practitioner, of the social worker, the counselor, the therapist. How can I get through to this person? Not putting a label on them, but how can I get through to them? And if you're interested in this particular concept, the places to look in the manual is the chapter on resistance to nourishing change, but it's also the chapter on communication exercises and how do we handle conflict in Pelham, because they're the part that's written up quite clearly is, we've got to get feedback, and that part of this resistance to nourishing change, and it brings us down to trust in the pendulum, which I want to get into in a moment. I just lost my thread for a minute. It's letting in feedback. And one of the things I developed around this, I guess this particular part of my work is this sort of hunk of work that at times we call the Pelham material on conflict. Because one of the ways that resistance to nourishing change comes out in residential programs, long residential programs, is it comes out in small ways. You're chopping the tomatoes the wrong way. Or your room is better than mine, and why has he got a better room than mine? It's within a marriage. The fight about whether toothpaste should be squeezed from the top or the bottom. And that's not what it's about at all. But resistance to nourishing change often surfaces around these small things. And yet it points to absolutely sort of fundamental issues that we all need to look at. And I guess developing it there, there was a sliver of David's work that really informed me about this. And he would say, if someone's fridge is a mess, I'll go and help them clean it up. I'll do it. I will clean it up. And if the person doesn't then clean it up himself, I'll go back and do it again. And then I'll go back and do it again. And that is so sort of different from, what would be called CBT now, or what was behavioral therapy or what was sort of diagnostic work. And that was just a sliver. He didn't put a whole lot of stuff around that, but somehow the spirit of that is it's on me to produce the goods. It's on me, the helper, to produce the goods, not put the diagnosis, resistant client onto the client. So, and that within that, there are issues to me of sort of fundamental questions, which I hope I can get into trust in the pendulum. I know there's a little bit all over the place, but there are fundamental questions of simply, and this is where AA comes in, and again, that sort of confirmed the direction I was going on, which accepting the need for change. That's sort of basic. And I've taken what I call resistance to nourishing change into a wider sphere, which is politics and government, how we organize ourselves, how we, government is about how big is the cake and who gets which slices and who makes the decision about who gets which slices. That is sort of what government politics is about. And within that, resistance to nourishing change has the huge issues of, what are we doing with the planet, or, how do we organize ourselves so we get on together? I would say resistance to nourishing change is a characteristic. One of the ways to look at it is a characteristic self-defeating behavior. It's very subtle. We have what in the write-up in the contribution training manual, I call our official therapeutic story. This is the reason I can't do that. And within that characteristic self-defeating behavior, it is very difficult to achieve the genuine openness that enables trust to develop. Because within resistance to nourishing change, if we bring it into Dave's material, it is a particular attraction to hurt and callous. In a simple way, which is there's a lot of harshness in this material, in this part of my work, a lot of harshness. And in the sense of, and my slogan to professionals is you've got to look in the window. I'm sorry, got it wrong. You've got to look in the mirror before you glance out the window and walk out the door. In other words, you've got to look in the window. You've got to look at yourself before you go to work. And that for all of us, that can be painful. Resistance, nourishing change, and a characteristic self-defeating behavior is that which we don't want to face, don't quite want to face. And then, so we're not quite who we appear to be, and in not quite being who we appear to be, and having the calluses that develop because we're hurting ourselves, other people will keep their distance. Now, if you bring the pendulum into that, uh, resistance to nourishing change is almost the buttons people can press and get a pendulum swing, because they are deep memory links, what David used to call referrals, and a pendulum will swing. So it will become more defensive, more inclined to present what I call our official therapeutic story. And in that, and it's a very subtle shaky, it's a very subtle shaky base for trust, because within it, we aren't quite being who we really are. And people, in a quite unconscious way, pick that up. And keep their distance. Now, if you add in hurtful pendulum swings, and when we're talking about hurtful pendulum swings, we're talking about how might I hurt you, how might you hurt me, how might I hurt myself. Just, I guess you could call it a sort of fog of misunderstanding. I mean, to make an almost oversimplified metaphor, but perhaps with some ring of truth in it. The impossibility, when there is impossibility of bipartisan action in politics, is because people don't quite believe the other person is who they are saying they are. On an unconscious level, something's going on here, I won't trust you. I guess that's a simple way. It's almost something is going on here, so I'll take a step or two back. Something's going on here that I won't quite listen to you. Something's going on here that I don't quite think who you are. And of course, in politics, something is going on here that's a secret, that's an agenda I can't get my head around. Therefore, I'm not going to trust you. I think the way that comes down is, and it's another part of my work that I got from Janet Lederman, who was the person who gave me all my breaks in Gestalt therapy. She was a student of Fritz Perls. She was not a psychotherapist or a psychologist. She was a school teacher from memory in LA. And she used Gestalt therapy in schools, kids. And she developed an approach in working with children, which was quite stark. That what children need is straight messages. They need straight messages almost more than they need love. And I guess mixed messages are in one level so much about resistance to nourishing change, so much about, well, I can't quite tell it to you straight because you won't understand me, or I can't quite tell it to you straight because, I've got a long developed habit of not being straight. And in terms of my approach, particularly to psychotherapy and the professions that live in the caring life force, I'm saying we've got to be transparent. We've got to be able to be there as a person before we're there as a professional. So what Pelham transparency is being open about who we are as people. And just to dial back a little bit to previous sessions, a use of transparency is very clear, and the rules around it are very clear. Someone is transparent to the extent of their status and experience. So the more senior person is really transparent, the inexperienced person is much less transparent, because that achieves safety. But I think what transparency achieves is trust. There's no question in my mind about that. I haven't done this for some time. But the way I would sell transparency to conventional professional groups is just efficient. Putting aside any moral argument, and the moral argument is very strong, nothing will develop trust the way transparency will. And that's a sort of common sense statement. That's, there's nothing particularly original about that. But there is an originality in the helping professions of saying, unless you are prepared to study transparency and understand it and use it, you will build trust slowly. You yourself will get in the way of building trust between you and the people to whom you're delivering the service. The helping professions have trouble with that, because I think it goes back to Freud, above all else, protecting his own authority. So you can't question him. And not only can you not question him, but you can't look him in the eye because you're lying on a couch. That's a bit cheap on my side, but there's an element of truth in it. And with transparency, because one of the things I've always believed that, I guess it's resistance to nourishing change. It wouldn't not be hard. Yes, Vic.
Thank you. I was comfortable just waiting for you to finish, but I think what you've said is just twigged something with me. I've had a question all through this. This is very obviously, again, very, very profound, and I don't want to oversimplify. So the phrase is resistance to nourishing change. And I confess, as I approached this, I thought, well, it's resistance to change, resistance to change. Oh, sure, I know everybody resists change. And then I thought, wait a minute, the phrase is resistance to nourishing change. And the question comes up in my mind, why would anybody resist nourishing change? And what comes into my mind is basically two things. First, they think, no, it's not nourishing. You're screwing with my mind, you're manipulating me, you're wanting to control me. So that's why a person would resist nourishing change, because they don't believe it. And you've touched on that. And then the other reason a person would resist nourishing change, is because they're so hurt that they don't even want to be positive. They're into the negative forces, as David would said. attraction to hurt. And so the hurt is overwhelming. So I guess my question is, either I'm right or I'm wrong about that, or half right about that. Because I'm thinking, I can understand if you say resistance to change. I'd be looking to myself, everybody can say resistance to change. But when you use the phrase resistance to nourishing change, I'm like, if you're trying to talk me into changing something, and if I really thought this was a nourishing thing, well, sure, I'd embrace it, because nourishing is, by inference, if I is positive for me. So am I making any sense there with my question? And can I ask for a little comment there? Thank you.
Yeah, cease.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about on Wednesday. And I was mentioning my resistance to doing housework, which obviously would be a good thing. And as we talked, it really kind of took place, that seed of that took place when I was a child. And I felt like I was kind of the maid of the house. So it was a resistance to not wanting to go back into that, being the child in my mind, you know. And so I think what frequently happens is that there's something holding us back that feels safe to us, why we don't want to make this change. There's, you know, it felt safe. I don't want to go out where I'm going to be at risk, or where I'm going to get loaded down. I don't know how to do that part. I don't know how to say no to things. I you know, so I think what I've liked about the Gestalt that we've done at Penn was to change into that role of being the resistance to change, or the resistance, and talk from that voice about what's going on, because it could be any number of things. So so that was very helpful for me to see how, in my particular case, it went back to childhood and not wanting to be, in my mind, kind of subjugated, although it's not really. But when I'm doing dishes now, I'm not really being subjugated or anything. So we talked about positive changes too. And I remembered a Penn with cleaning the kitchen. We did it as a Broadway show, and we would take different parts and sing and dance as we did things. So it became more than just getting by. It was great fun. I don't think all things work out quite that well, but that's how I see it. There's something in me that says it's not going to be good if I make this change. It's a protection. So that's how it is for me.
Yeah, Cynthia.
Actually, I have a question about that, especially after what C shared. And maybe I don't know if I understand resistance to nourishing change real well, because one of the things that you said was that resistance to nourishing change is something that actually, if you do it, it's really not that big of a deal. Would it be resistance to nourishing change if doing something is creating bad memory links, or if stuff like that? Or is that, or because I'm thinking of like two different things. Like one of them, like for me, you know, Subway's, if we're going out to eat, Subway is probably healthier, I guess, I don't know, than like McDonald's. And I will tell you, and I like it, I'll eat it, but you know, I'm never excited about it. I never want it, but then I'm okay with it once I eat it. But there's other things that, you know, just do. I mean, I finally got through with the whole doctor thing, and I'm gonna have to contact him again because I'm still not, but I won't go into that. But you know, there's like a difference, like you know, like for example, for a while I was getting real into attraction to negative hurt with the politics, and what I could do instead would be play a game in Japanese, which I really love doing, but and I'm happy and I enjoy it, but I was still getting caught up in what I call the YouTube vortex. I guess that's my question, is that is resistance to nourishing change when you're dealing with bad memory links, or sometimes I think I'm resistant to something and then I realize, oh, it actually physically hurts me to do it because there's something in my physical body, or so I'm wondering, am I right that there's a difference between the two, or am I?
The two, explain the two again.
Resistance to nourishing change, the difference that is it really resistance to nourishing change if there's something like a painful memory link,
Right. Yeah.
or pain, or physical pain, or creating the problem.
Yeah, it's. I think theoretically this stuff is complicated. Okay, but to answer your question directly, if the memory links are from trauma, are from abuse, are from deprivation. So if the change we cannot achieve is because the negative memory links cripple us, I wouldn't call that resistance to nourishing change. And in a way, I think at my best, I wouldn't call it resistance. You know, I would sort of say, hey, this is stuff we've got to work on, and it's tough. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to take a long time, and it might not work. Resistance to nourishing change, I feel, is a sort of smaller room, okay? It's, it's those things that, one of the characteristics of it is sort of stubbornness and sort of digging at heels in and not wanting to let other people in. But the important point, I think, and go back to the, what Cynthia and Vic and you said, in my view, resistance to nourishing change is something that once worked for us, okay? So my resistance to nourishing change is not being organized, being disorganized, and a certain sort of rebelliousness in that. And I think that came from something. I think my life is a flight from the suburbs of Sydney, Australia. It's not a flight from a happy childhood. I mean, as a parent, as a person, I had a happy childhood, and it was even not particularly in my generation, but in the generation after I left. Australia was called the happy. No, it was called the lucky country. It had sort of lucked out. It had everything going for it. 75 degrees in the middle of winter. Although winter was, July, not February. So I didn't want to go down the route, which I did for 7 years, of being an Australian civil servant, of being this conforming Australian person. If you remember strata, this is social strata. This is my complex relationship to Australia. So to bring it back, resistance to nourishing change to me is often something that once worked for us. It worked for somebody to be quiet and never say anything because they grew up in a family of 7 where there was domestic violence, and the way to survive was not to be noticed. So it worked to be silent, not communicate with people on a close or intimate level, and then that person becomes an adult, and that inability to get close because the person wants to hide. That to me is the sort of way resistance to nourishing change came. You know, I sort of got out of what worked for me by sort of being rebellious, being radical, being, you know, getting drunk at the, when I was a kid, getting drunk at the diplomatic reception I was supposed to be setting up. So resistance nourishing change sort of works on this underground level. Now, you know, that sort of characteristic, you know, being disorganized is, you know, could cripple Pelham, okay? Yeah, it's not a good idea. You know, I don't need to take any more risks. I don't need to be radical. You know, I need to be organized, guys. So I think that that's where resistance to nourishing change comes in. And the skill and hope is to be able to say, hey, you could do this, but we're sort of attached to that. And you get it sort of in countries, you know. England is attached to the class system. America is almost attached to, just to mention one, economic inequality. You know, we're not going to level up the society. We're going to give everyone a chance to be a billionaire, or a millionaire, or a landowner, going all the way back. So, you know, England didn't, historically didn't descend into one civil war after another, but maintained a stable society with the class system, which is now a killer all over the place. You know, go west, young man. This is an enterprising country. You know, everyone can make it. And now, no, you know, the economic inequality will rip the country apart. The other one I like in terms of this, and what I'm saying is these things could change. It wouldn't be that big a deal. So they are nourishing, but they're not perceived as nourishing, or they're not perceived as possible. You know, we started off, you know, we were small, you know, we were insignificant. The other beasties around us were huge. You know, bigger teeth, they can move faster than we. You know, we didn't even have fur, for Christ's sake. So we learned how to pick up sticks and bop the beasties on the head, and we survived. And we survived, we became brilliant. But now we can't give up arms. Okay, so it's something that once worked for us, surviving as a species surrounded by other species which were stronger than us, faster than us, bigger than us, but they weren't smarter than us. So we learned how to defend ourselves with arms against that. And then we turned that into the, you know, military-industrial complex. We turned that into atom bombs. We turned that into, because, you know, I'm talking about resistance to nourishing change. You know, I live in a country where cops do not carry guns. And it's not said enough in England. England's not very good at blowing its own trumpet these days. But when you think of that in terms of other countries, cops who do not carry guns. And Nikki's been a cop. Don't know if you want to comment on that, Nikki.
that was in the 80s, but it is still true, except, particularly, there are firearms officers. They've done particular training, and there'll be one at each station. And yeah, I once had to strap this young guy into his like body armor thing. He had to. It's funny. He got a call out. He had to go. Some youth was taking pot shots with an air rifle from his bedroom window, and so PC Mark something or other had to go. Crazy. I'm sure that I don't think I'm mixing up stories. Maybe I am mixing up stories. Maybe it was some other incident he had to go and deal with. But anyway, I remember him. I had to book the gun out of the safe. We had to sign it, both of us, and sign the bullets, count the bullets, and put the bullets. Sign him for his sort of, bulletproof vest thing, which was in 2 bits with tapes that he had to put under his uniform, and he was all fingers and thumbs and putting it on upside down, and I had to help him dress. He's doing all this in the police station before he has to set off in his Panda car and go and deal with whatever it was. Anyway, that's what I know about it.
Yeah, so I guess I would bring I would bring the thing about police and guns or armies into resistance to nourishing change. We could do that. We could do it differently. I think some of resistance to nourishing change came from the anthropologist Leakey, who studied sort of, that part of Africa where human beings first developed. That was his life's work. And he said, we change or we perish. Vic. You're muted, I think, Vic.
Sorry. Oh boy. So I think I've been misunderstanding something. I've been thinking that this phrase means resistance to nourishing change means a person is resisting someone else who's proposing a change that is nourishing. But just listening to you right now, I got a different take on it, because you talked about, and you said resistance to nourishing change. So I'm thinking nourishing change is a phrase by itself. It's something by itself. It's not a person that's doing the nourishing necessarily. Okay, it might not be a person doing the nourishing. It might be me thinking of something that's a nourishing change if I do it. Right? It might not be anybody. It might be going out and going running every day. So there's 2 meanings there, and I don't want to be intellectual and get all silly about it, but I'm trying to understand, because when you're talking about a wider societal change, we could do this. We could have law enforcement without guns. That's resistance to, so it's a nourishing change. It's even biblical, right? They'll lay down their swords and no more make, and so that's a nourishing change if we could do law enforcement without guns. So does anybody understand what I'm saying here? Because you're talking about nourishing.
Yeah, I think
nourishing change nourishing change is a noun rather than nourish as a verb. And does that make any sense?
Well, it does, but I think it covers both. Again, it's a tool, okay? So tools have that sort of, they've got a shape. They're this. Then what someone does with it, because I put it into political context or historical context, there'd be other ways to do that. And if we pulled just quickly, it's a bit demanding of you, if we pulled resistance to nourishing change over into the strata material, okay, then it sort of, I think, can come a bit clear. Now, this is someone who's really into Pelham and my stuff, and not everybody is. But I think if we pulled it over there into strata, And as I've said here, you can't work with strata without putting your strengths in there, okay? You just can't do it. Part of, I think there's a few points of Dave Pennant's particular genius, but one of them was how his work over and over again has a positive input. So if we brought resistance, nourishing change over into strata, then we'd say, yeah, come on, Peter, you got that and that. You know, you got that emotional strata, you got that evaluation strata. Of course you could do something with your accomplishment strata. But bringing it sort of over there, I think it may be the case that resistance to nourishing change can't quite stand on its own. Okay, it has to be applied to other things as well, other tools.
So is it, am I misunderstanding you? Because I'm almost thinking, what would it be accurate to say that what this phrase means is resistance to what is positive? Nourishing change is obviously positive. So so it's what we're looking at, it that in us, what is in us or in someone else we're trying to help in whatever capacity, there's a resistance to what is positive. Am I oversimplifying, or is that correct?
No, I think that's there, because it is at best a simple tool. It's something we can almost recognize, except we're stubborn and we won't. I mean, yeah, Cynthia.
Well, I was thinking about one example from the political arena in the United States is, more than the other things, the polarization between, two parties. And it's had it, I mean, they've tried to have other systems, but it's never worked. It always comes back to these two parties. And they're so busy fighting party wise, they can't do anything. And it happens. I mean, I tend to sympathize more with the Democrat side, but you can see it. I mean, even like the thing like this whole, actually I was listening to Barack Obama talk about this, the whole thing about defunding the police. That's that whole phrase is very shocking, and he was talking about, can you say something a little different, not just to make people comfortable, but so that Michelle's mother can understand, and but there's a sense that we've got to fight about. I mean, the whole concept actually seems pretty like almost a no-brainer. You have the police do less. If you've got a mental health issue, you send in a social worker, either with the police or by themselves. I mean, if they're violent, you may need a police to deal with it, but most of the time they're not trained in that. And now I heard they've got police in the schools. I didn't even know that. I mean, that you don't have police doing things that are not the police's job, which seems to make, I mean, it's like, why would you, but it becomes this whole fight in part because of the language. And I don't know why. And it's like, because the sides have to fight, for some reason, nobody can just have a compromise and just do things that are straight common sense.
Yeah, well, I think again, something that worked once, and it doesn't work anymore. So, given that American history was, because the difference between guns in Canada and America is huge. Because there are tons of guns in Canada, but Canada doesn't have the gun death problem that America has. But we had the RCMP, rolls off my tongue, I was surprised, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We had law historically in the places that were being opened up by pioneers. We had law there first. In America, they had the pioneers, and then the law came in. So that sort of bit of history. So I guess you could say that you know, it worked for Americans to have guns. It's complicated for me. It doesn't work anymore. I mean, to have police forces with tanks is sort of stupid. So I think what we're looking at here is just another way of looking. In a way, it's another way of looking at attraction to hurt. But I guess in a sense, it's bringing it more down on ourselves and a particular sort of responsibility. What is the resistance to nourishing change I can face, and how can I do it? And the bit I wanted to put in, and the reason resistance to nourishing change, and it's not resistance to all change, it's just that resistance to that bit that could be relatively easy, but in a sense we are invested in it because it won't work for us. Stuff that once worked for us, it's hard to give up, and that's on every level of the human journey. I mean, I'm Australian, you know, so can it be said that it won't work for us to go in and conquer these countries and wipe out the indigenous population? Because then we had luck, to use the word that's described Australia, or we had prosperity, we had security. And that's a complex tangle of memory links, both for Australia and America. Yes, Cease.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking that sometimes it's not really the process of making the change. Well, let me go back. We're not resistant to what like, if I tried to imagine my study all neat and nice, that'd be great. That's not what bothers me. You know, that doesn't scare me.
I missed the word there, Cease, sorry.
What? I was thinking it's the process of getting to that.
I get that. What was the example you used?
Well, I was using that since we were talking about that on Wednesday, cleaning up and organizing.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's the goal doesn't scare me of having a nice, neat office. In fact, that would be great. It's the process of going through it that seems so onerous to me. And where am I going with this? I think that's sometimes hard to see that path very well. And I think that's true with a lot of change, at least in my life. It's finding that path and being able to do it and figuring out ways to make it happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
and I guess one of the things we're saying here in resistance to nourishing change, and I guess making it something specific, something, you know, it is within us set to do this, okay? Almost, you know, if God was on our side, we'd do it. Or if the stars were in the right places, we'd do it. Mary.
I just wonder whether it might help clarify for Vic if I came in with my long-term recent example. One of my big resistance to change, Vic, is I wouldn't do exercises. Initially, it was bending my knee back from my actual knees, but generally, apart from a little bit of walking, I wouldn't do exercise to help me. And especially with this year of Zoom meetings, I just got to let Nikki in. where I've been sitting and only taken the dog for little walks, I was even further away from exercising properly. And I could feel a lot of, well, just have years of resistance. And I did work in every virtual pen in Italy and talked about experiences when I was young, you know, got some of the memory links of it. So something changed for me recently, which gave me a motivation to change. And somebody advised, because I was getting more and more bent over with my scoliosis, that I started doing physical therapy. So I've been doing physical therapy 3 times a week, which has been quite painful because I have these really scrunched up muscles, and the very expert physical therapist has been massaging all these really, where my muscles are all shortened from lifelong scoliosis. So when I first went in, the chiropractic doctor in charge said, we'll do these massages first, and then you'll do some assisted exercise, which meant they would move me on the table. And I had this little flicker of hope. Oh, I'm not, because it's that do something every day thing, right? That raises all my resistance to nourishing change. I can't do it every day. And it's exercise as well. I mean, like the 2 things, I'm resistant to nourishing change. So right from the beginning of going to the physical therapist, I had this sense of I'm not going to be catapulted into, right, do this now, you know, like you might be if you went to a personal trainer, right? So I kept on having it was you know, very bad. My muscles were in a bad state, contracted state. So, you know, I had week after week of painful, but feeling the release of the muscles. And I've probably been going for maybe 3 months, 3 times a week. And just last week, he showed me, well, he told me my legs were weak, and that did bother me. My legs had got weak with sitting for Zoom meetings and not moving, right? So I instigated walking upstairs one leg after another, so I was carrying my body weight, because I'd been protecting hurting bits by joining my feet and not carrying my body weight upstairs. Anyway, I'm not sure quite where I'm going with this, but when he showed me when the physical therapist did exercises on my legs, I thought, oh, I really like these. I think I could do these. These are much easier than the one I was having trouble with, where you have to lie on your front. And I said to him, so am I going to have to do these on my own? And he said, well, in a few weeks' time, we won't let you do them yet. And I thought, oh, good. It's like felt further protection for moving in really slowly to overcoming the resistance to nourishing change. Well, I like these exercises, but they're not going to let me do them. That's really good news. I'm going to really want to do them by the time they say I can. So I don't know if any of that's helpful, but it was sort of a gradual unraveling of a really profound resistance to change.
Yeah, I think with resistance to nourishing change, as I've said in other sessions here, you know, I developed it to handle really difficult stuff that you get in residential programs, okay? And I did it in particular, and this is in the contribution training manual. I talk about Pelham's ways of handling conflict situations and the learning opportunities in conflict situations. That's just sort of history. As it sort of sits now, I think as a tool, it's about, would this be useful to me to look at? Would it be useful, you know, whatever part of my life I want to improve, you know, would it be useful to bring in resistance to nourishing change? Because I think if we bring in, and you know, this is where it's a comprehensive toolbox. I think if we bring in resistance to nourishing change, particularly with things we've been talking about here, we're almost immediately, I think, into rejected efforts. And how can we turn rejected efforts into accepted efforts? Then we're into the practicality of making it an accepted effort. And in a sense, the triangle in that part of the work is not going into the memory links, okay? That is the sort of behavioral CBT part of our work. And I think by being able to say, yeah, I sort of don't want to go there. I don't want to be organized. What's in that for me? And then thinking about, you know, busting out of being an Australian civil servant who'd have shorts and knee socks and putting up the Australian flag in Canberra in my suburban home, and somehow the not wanting that. I almost didn't know I didn't want it. I think we often, and that, you know, that's a nourishing in a sense. You know, that wasn't coming out of trauma. That was coming out of, you know, my mum and dad gave me so much, and now I want something else. You know, it's sort of a base, Cynthia.
It's interesting you're talking about the memory links because that's actually one of the things when I did the Marie Kondo's book about how to, you know, tidy up and stuff, which I did as far as I could by myself, but I don't live
Your
alone.
volume's quite low.
Oh, I'm sorry. But one of the things is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I switched the microphone and I'm talking a little louder. When I was reading Marie Kondo and I was really into it, one of the things she said when going through the stuff is that she had a very specific order you organized in. And she said the very last thing you do is memorabilia. So, and if you go into something that has a lot of memory links in our language, you just put that aside. You don't,
Wow.
and then you put that in a thing, and then you go back to everything else. And then when you finished everything, then you go to your memorabilia. So
that's really interesting. Thank you. That because I go into I've got 4 divorces, okay? So I go into my papers and stuff, and something comes up that wipes me out, right? So
that's why she says,
that is really, really useful for me. Thank you. Yeah.
That's why she says that. She said because that will get you stuck and you'll just be in your memories so you just put that aside and get everything and have like a box or a section where you keep all your memorabilia.
Yeah, because memorabilia is just another way of saying memory links. Yeah. I mean, this piece of paper takes me back to that 40 years ago. Tamara, do you want to come in at all? Maybe she's gone away for a bit.
Peter?
My experience of it is it's complicated. You know, this one's complicated. And I think this is just my experience. And that's why I came up with resistance to nourishing change. And it's stuff that, you know, it's within our skill set to achieve and da. because there's a lot of defensiveness in it. There's a lot of official therapeutic story. There's a lot of, it's almost deflecting into some other issue. That's what I think happens in families, marriages, probably some businesses. And I find it's just useful to, at best, I think it can lighten very tough situations. It can lighten. I don't know how you get there, but I said that I live in a country where the cops don't carry guns, and I also live in a country that gave birth to William Shakespeare. There's a lot of sort of special things here in England, in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, where people could say, hey, we got so much going for us. We could have a deep look at the class system, at the accents, and what they mean. Because we've got a whole bunch going for us. And people sort of can't, they go into convoluted, tangled things. It's always easier to see this from the outside, see it in somebody else. You've only got it, Mary.
I just wanted to give an example of resistance to nourishing change that's actually about resistance to nourishing change, trust in the pendulum, as it happens. Because when I was young, my experience of having, in my case, like wonderful, exciting, compulsive highs, and then having terrible depression was, I didn't, in common with other people who have extreme mood swings, I didn't know there was any connection at all between the extreme enjoyable high and the terrible low. I didn't know I was missing out the tolerable areas and crashing down and going up like a rocket. I didn't know any of that. And when I first started twigging that, so started understanding that if I was going to change this, it meant I had to do something about, I had to recognize that being in the extreme high wasn't all good, because it felt like that was the only good part of my life. I was really resistant to letting go of this only good part of my life. And why I made the little joke about it, brings in trust as well as the pendulum, was, this was a while into my time with Peter and Helen and learning the tools and teaching the pendulum to other people. And I just thought, well, I don't quite remember the moment I thought this, but I know at some point I thought, well, I decided to trust. I decided to trust the tool and on the struggle of giving up what seemed so, risking giving up what seemed so precious. And so I think that's all I wanted to say, really, is just like, I'm so grateful I did. But, I've met other people with similar extreme mood swings, and they really don't want to give up the highs, and they won't go there.
I do think that touches on what what I call that particular part of David's genius, where it doesn't matter what you look at, there's some positive stuff there, to use the word I've used a lot. There's some nourishing stuff there, because on the one hand, you know, people are scared to give up the highs because you know, it's the best thing in their life, right? Whether it's heroin or compulsive sex or whatever, it's the best thing in their life. You know, David's coming along and saying, yes, okay, that's true, but we can teach you to have that become the pendulum. And then I come along and say, and that's what Vincent van Gogh did, and that's what Barack Obama did, and that's what Pierre Trudeau did, the great Canadian Prime Minister. You know, they had the passion, and it, you know, it's a joke and a cliche around Obama, you know, no drama Obama, but that is, you know, political intensity in the middle of the pendulum. And if you read Van Gogh's letters, he had the highs, he had the vision, but the production of the paintings was in the middle of the pendulum. So, you know, you can almost take any bit of Dave's work and there's that positive stuff there. I love it. I just love it. Cease.
Another part, though, that I think Helen had is a residential, because the being there was the stable, that was the middle of the pendulum, that was the calm. You know, I know there were different dramas going on too, but still it was the container that we had, that we knew if we were working on something, there were other people that we could talk to about it, who would point out something that we were doing that was stupid in a nice way, that could, you know, speak to you in a non put down kind of way, and we're very accepting. So it was having that container of acceptance, I think, was really a key for me to know that almost like what happened to Cynthia. It's like having friends come over when you're working on organizing your closet or something.
Yeah,
they were there when you're doing that support, or when you're doing that hard thing. And I think that helps to developing that safe place, whether it's just in your therapy office or in a group or the community or finding new people, I think is another addition to making those changes. And I think that really helped me when I went to Pelham, that there was just such an overwhelming acceptance and positive feedback. And even if people had negative feedback, they did it in a positive way. I don't remember the exact things, but and practicing things like we did. And you would give us an exercise, go practice this, go around the room and practice saying this to everybody. Go around, practice doing this at dinner tonight. So, so all those practices gave us a safe place to practice, if that makes sense. And if we messed up, there was some way we could bounce back. And I know I messed up a few times. Maybe, I don't know how many. I didn't stop counting, but it's, that safety is really, I think, critical. And as Cynthia was saying about having a safe plan is another way. I don't have to deal with this hard stuff now. I can deal with that later. I can get some success doing this middle stuff. Really makes sense to me. I'm going to try that. Sounds weird to call it a safe place when you're organizing your office, but it feels like I can't do it. I mean, that's what makes it feel unsafe, like I'm not capable in my mind, but having a safe plan makes me feel more comfortable that I could do it. So I'm kind of putting everything together here today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And thank you for going all those years back. That's nice for me. But I think there is something about the pendulum and trust and creating safety and going slow.
Mhm.
You know, one of the big parts of resistance to nourishing change is if someone's in resistance to nourishing change, you know, they're going to have a hard time. They're going to be stuck. They're going to be stubborn. You know, and what I'm saying is that is all of us. That is all of us. That young poet who
Yeah. I don't
What's
know.
her-
Amanda Gorman.
Andrew,
Amanda Gorman, is that right?
Amanda Gorman. I mean, she said it. You know, they will destroy the country before they will share it. And we're sort of all like that, you know. And I think for me and for Pelin, the model of a nourishing family, the metaphor of a nourishing family, the checkpoint of a nourishing family, because I think they do go back. The nourishing family unconsciously goes back to trust. Okay, something's not working. We will change it. But I guess within that, you know, there's a sort of fundamental thing in a nourishing family. And I'm not saying every family. You know, there are evil families. You know, there's nothing naive, Pollyannish about this. Yeah, we've got to fundamentally change something for the kids. Talk about memory links. I mean, that's a memory link that goes back beyond our species, right? And within, within the concept of memory links, we have that flexibility to look at everything. And I think there is something that a nourishing family does face resistance to nourishing change. Hey guys, we could do that differently. And you say that to little ones, you know, come on, you know, you two could get on. You don't have to fight all the time. Mary.
I just wanted to say what Cease raised about the safe container that Pelin was. I was thinking about how all the 12-step programs are essentially about different aspects of resistance to change, you know, giving up sugar, giving up being in debt, giving up gambling, giving up drink. And that the whole container of the different 12-step fellowships is really carefully constructed to help people through resistance to nourishing change. It's very safe, very small steps. The huge one is take what you like and leave the rest. You know, that's really helpful. There are bits of the program or different parts of it you don't like.
And that was something David said really clearly. You know, people will take what they want. And it doesn't matter if they leave, except it hurts me like crazy. I mean, that was his bit of self-awareness. Vic.
You know, I just, I don't know if I've got the right piece. She said about a safe container, and then what Mary just said. And it put me back, to be really frank with you, put me back 50 years to walking into the activator unit. That was a container, and that was a nourishing family. And Mary had just said how and it had to be carefully constructed, and that's what David did. That's what he did. I remember being in the activator unit, and I remember, Peter will remember this, that David would use the ancient Greeks, and he would talk about the Epicureans and the Cyrenaics. And the Cyrenaics and the ancient Greeks were the pleasure seekers. And the Epicureans were in the middle of the pendulum, and he would give this. And so he would give this philosophy. And then all these people, you know, the other ring holders and everybody else is all buying into this. And so you'd walk right into a container, walk right into a carefully constructed experience, and then you could start to initiate change. I mean, you know, you've just all again touched me about walking right. I can just see myself walking into the unit right now and experiencing that change. I'm going to have to leave pretty quick, so I'll just say that again. This is Vic in Abbotsford, and I thank you all very much for sharing. If I have to leave before it's over, my apologies, but I've got another meeting to leave.
No problem. We'll be finished in a minute anyway.
Great to see you, Vic. I'm glad you were able to come.
Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah, you always contribute a lot, Victor. So it's good. And you have that history that you bring us to. So and your successes are really, I was going to say spectacular. They really stand out. And so it's really great when you're able to be here.
Thank you, Cease, and thank you all very much. I'm going to run now. I really appreciate connecting with you, and I will be back. But I can't say how consistent. I got a lot on the plate. Thank you so much, and stay safe. Bye for now.
Bye. Hey, there's Cynthia.
So we'll be finishing there anyway. Yeah, and I'll just in finishing off whatever we want to say in finishing off. Yeah, I'm Peter, and I'm in, hold on a minute. I'm in King's Lynn in England, where it is 1 degree centigrade. I looked it up. Do you want to go, Nikki? Keep it on the geography.
Nikki in Wimbledon, 7:30. In that case, it's probably slightly above that temperature here. In London, and useful for me hearing everybody, because my resistance to nourishing change about decluttering and clearing up and being lost in it is, you know, I always know that it's about memory links, but it just keeps coming back around to that. It's all loads of memory links and how they all link together, and I guess I might have resistance to nourishing change. Oh, here's a thought about just once and for all identifying all those memory links all as one group, putting them all in order or something, and then setting them aside. That's a new revelation. Thank you.
Okay. Tamara? Maybe Tamara's not there. Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and it is now just about 1:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, Cease?
Cease, it's 2:30 here in Tampa, Florida, and it's 80 degrees. There's a really nice breeze. God, so nice. And I'm kind of been fooling around in my garden a little bit as I'm listening or talking, which is just a nice way. We were talking about pairing positive experiences with things we're not just, this was a great way to pair the wisdom of Pelin with gardening. It feels like growing something together, and kind of that metaphor. And Cynthia, I talked after you left about that idea of putting things that are memories that are hard to deal with.
I heard that.
Okay,
I
you
was
heard.
there. I just had my video off because I'm dealing with a lot of itching, so I'm fidgety. So that's why I turned off my video.
So
when I'm
I
talking.
appreciated that. Thank you, everybody. It was great. Thank you.
Mary?
I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach at 11:30 odd. And I guess that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. See you. Sorry.
Bye.